It has been a little bit since we talked about the NBA playoffs. We're going to go over what's going on around the league today. Talk about some of the lessons we can learn from the Clippers and the Bulls now that they've been eliminated a while back, but they've been eliminated. It's time for some playoff lessons on today's Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is May 11th, 2022. My name is Philip Rossman. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow us on Twitter or follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to go around the league a little bit, talk a little bit about what's going on in the playoffs, kind of keep up to date with what's actually going on in the NBA as we get ready for the NBA draft lottery. We'll do some lottery talk. We'll do some draft talk tomorrow. We'll talk some playoff lessons, what we can learn from the LA Clippers and Chicago Bulls as well. Before we do that, though, we want to thank you for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for. The Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day. I do like to spend some time talking about what's going on around the rest of the NBA. Obviously, we want to do everything with an Orlando Magic bent to it and with an eye on the Orlando Magic. But obviously, we're kind of in a waiting pattern. We're doing some player evaluations. We're doing some season recap stuff. But we're waiting for Tuesday. Tuesday is NBA Draft Lottery Day, and it's obviously an exciting day. It's obviously an interesting day, and we'll do another mock draft Friday on Friday at noon on Twitter Spaces at OMagicDaily. So pencil that into your calendars there, Friday at noon. But we're obviously just we're just waiting right now for news to drop and for the Magic's future to somewhat get determined, to know what is really in store and ahead for the Orlando Magic. And I will say my usual lottery warnings here. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Everything's out of their control. There's nothing the Magic can do. They did their work to put themselves in a good draft position. I'm comfortable with at least 6, maybe 7 guys in this draft. It's going to be okay no matter what happens. Obviously the Magic, they need an influx of talent. They need top-end talent. That's going to be key for the team. But, really what I'm seeing throughout the playoffs this year, and it's going to be one of the points I'm going to draw out here in a little bit, is just how vital depth is to success in this league, to success in the playoffs, and just success as you're going through things. You look at the Memphis Grizzlies. Yes, they had a really tough loss to Golden State the other night in game 4 to fall down 3-1 in that series, but Memphis played a good chunk of their season without Ja Morant, and until Monday night, had a really good record, even without Ja Morant in the mix. And so that is a really important lesson to remember, that you have to be able to play without your stars. And we'll draw out that point a little bit more. But you look throughout the league, there are injuries after injuries after injuries after injuries. Devin Booker missed some time in the first round. Philadelphia was without Joel Embiid, and he's clearly playing hurt right now for the Philadelphia 76ers. The Milwaukee Bucks are playing without Chris Middleton. The Celtics have had to deal without Robert Williams. Injuries are a fact of the NBA. They're a fact of the regular season. They're a fact in the playoffs, and you have to be able to cover and play around those guys. But as always in the playoffs, you see the stars really rise to the occasion and rise to the top. Whether it was Brandon Ingram in the first round with the New Orleans Pelicans, whether it's been Giannis Antetokounmpo for the Bucks, whether it's been several guys for the Heat. The Heat are just an amazingly fun team to watch. Ja Morant's had big games. Steph Curry's had big games. Jordan Poole's had big games. Luka, Jalen Brunson. It's the usual lessons that we see in the playoffs. I would say the injuries so far have taken away from the playoff experience, have taken away from the way that we would like to see these playoffs play out. Obviously, Obviously, you want to see the best players. You want to see the best teams with their best lineups out there. And that's been, frankly, one of the disappointing parts of this playoffs. I mean, clearly Philadelphia can give Miami a good run for their money, but clearly Joel Embiid's not 100%. Playing with the injury in his thumb, playing, with the fractured orbital bone. It's clear Embiid is not able to do the things that he was able to do normally and put up the MVP caliber season that he's had. There's been a lot of award talk lately. I would say celebrate all three of the finalists for MVP, not just the winner. Everyone's had an MVP caliber season, and it's been a really fun season individually for a lot of guys. The playoffs are their own thing. I believe this about the playoffs. The regular season's about analytics. The playoffs are just about doing whatever you got to do to win. You got to be able to hit mid-range shots in the playoffs. You got to be able to be flexible and adjust. I think that was a big criticism of Steve Clifford in his time in Orlando, is when the Magic got to the playoffs, they couldn't adjust. They couldn't be flexible. They could only play their way. And that made it easy to really hone in on them. Obviously, they didn't have top-end talent, which helps with improvisation. And again, this is, I think, something Jamal Mosley's trying to implement into his roster and to his game plan early, even if the team doesn't necessarily have the personnel to play that style. The playoffs have been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed these playoffs. The second round, I'll admit, has been, despite how close these series are, has been a little disappointing. I was expecting some real battles, especially in that Milwaukee-Boston series, which has been a lot of fun. But obviously, these are the 8 best teams in the league right now. And I think we're due for a really good conference finals and hopefully a really good finals as well. Hopefully everyone stays healthy, because that's been the main story so far. Let's dive in specifically to the LA Clippers, because I think they draw this point out really, really, really well about what it takes to win and what's necessary to kind of keep yourself alive. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, our next partner has a product that I literally use every day. I started taking AG1 because I am focusing on myself this year. It's a New Year's resolution I've had. I've kind of gone back and forth with it. I'm trying to spend, especially now that we're in the off season, focusing on myself, taking care of myself and my body, and Athletic Greens and AG1 is a great way to do this. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all the things that you should be focused on. It's really that simple. It's just one drop a day, a scoop of powder into your water in the morning. It's really, really easy to take and really, really easy to integrate into your day. Tons of people take some kind of multivitamin, and it's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. AG1 is a small micro habit with big benefits. It's one thing you can do every single day to take care of yourself. Your subscription comes with a year's supply of vitamin D, which is so important to add in those winter months when we don't get as much sunlight. We're obviously past that. Athletic Green has over 7,000 5-star reviews. It's recommended by professional athletes and trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NBA network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NBA network. That's greens plural, to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. We want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic your first listen every day. Make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast hosted by Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter. He is joined by our friend Richard Stayman, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA Draft, mock draft, player rankings, and, of course, big boards. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So what I like to do as teams get eliminated from the playoffs, it's something we got to pick up the pace a little bit on here as we get past the second round, is kind of look at the teams as they're eliminated and try to draw lessons out from how they played and what the Magic, especially a rebuilding Magic team, can learn from these teams and these organizations as they try to build to their next step or try to take their next step. Orlando's obviously at a very beginning stage of the rebuild. They're trying to build something up and excuse me, and advance in their rebuild. And so there's important lessons to take from teams that are having some success or are potentially having some failures in the process, some ways that this team can continue to learn. And so when I look at the LA Clippers, obviously a team that is interesting in so many ways. A team that's not like the Orlando Magic because they have a Paul George, they have a Kawhi Leonard, both missed the majority of the year because of injuries. Kawhi missed a whole year. Paul George missed 50 some odd games. They have those star players in place, but because of injuries, they had to become a completely different team. They were not the team they intended to be at the beginning of the season. And obviously they had a do or die game against New Orleans Pelicans without their star player and Paul George that they ended up losing and ended up missing the playoff field. Injuries have been a story for the LA Clippers for a long time. It's just a fact of life for a team with Kawhi Leonard. And so starting under Doc Rivers, continuing under Ty Lue, the Clippers have worked really hard to establish an identity that is more than their stars. And while they ultimately ended up falling short of making the playoffs for a number of reasons, the Clippers are a team that the Magic can really model themselves after, at least the version that doesn't have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Look at that Clippers team. They got some good veterans, Reggie Jackson, Ivica Zubac, Luke Kennard. They got some young guys, Terrence Mann. They've got some interesting players that really found their way and found a way to keep that team alive while Paul George was out. Now, the Clippers were not that great. From December 8th to March 20th, they were good, but they weren't great. When Paul George was out from December 8th to March 25th, the Clippers went 23-27 and had a minus 3.2 net rating. Their offense was 26th in the league. Their defense was 17th in the league. Again, these numbers are not so dissimilar from how the Magic played, but what was different was the Clippers still found ways to win games. They were a team that just ground things out, and even though their record, their overall net rating is probably better or worse than their record actually ended up being, they won where it mattered. They won the stat that mattered. They won their fair share of games to keep themselves afloat. The absence pushed Reggie Jackson to score more. He averaged 16.3 points per game and shot 39.3% from floor. Again, not super efficient, but enough to get the job done. Terrence Mann and Amir Coffey both scored more than 10 points per game, stepping up in the absence and finding a way. And the Clippers just found guys to take over. They found guys who were able to get hot and get going and stay and keep themselves in games. And this Clippers team, as the Magic found out in both games this year, both played without Paul George, if I'm not mistaken. The Magic found out you let this Clippers team hang around and play in a close game, they are going to find a way to win. They had more comeback victories than any team in the league, if I'm not mistaken, this season. Or at the very least, they had their very fair share of comebacks, including an impossible comeback in Washington where Luke Kennard hit, I think, 8 points in like 45 seconds or something like that. The reality is the Clippers, despite clear shortcomings on the roster, despite a team that was clearly shorthanded, a team that clearly was missing talent, they didn't get to 500, obviously, but they still found ways to win. They still found a way to carve an identity that was beyond their stars. And obviously when Paul George came back, they started to pick up some steam and go on a tear before to make the play-in tournament or to stay in the play-in tournament. And obviously they fell short in Minnesota. If Paul George had played against New Orleans, who knows what would have happened. The Clippers are a model in that sense because their team had an identity beyond their stars. And I think that's really, really important. You look at Memphis and the way that they're playing without Ja Morant, and they'll likely be without Ja Morant. They'll be without Ja Morant probably tonight for sure, and he's doubtful for the rest of the playoffs, no matter how long that lasts for Memphis. You look at a team like Memphis, they find ways to win even without their star. And that is such a key and powerful thing. To be able to play well, to be able to compete at a high level, even without your best player. Even if you're missing key players, guys step up. They rise to the challenge. Your team still plays very much the same way. Memphis might play a little grimier or dirtier, but that's really no different from how they want to play anyway. This is a big thing for me, is to make sure your team has an identity beyond its star. Your star is going to help you, and your star is going to help you craft your identity. The Magic have drafted a ton of defensive guys. They want to be a defensive team. But the Magic, whenever they get their star, whenever they get that central player, they need to still maintain key facets of who they want to be on both offense and defense. So that, yes, the task will be tougher without your star. It always is. But that way, you can keep playing at the same level. You can keep doing the same things. You can keep finding ways to be success. I mean, Steve Clifford talked about this forever. You find your way to play. And then you play that way no matter who's in the game, no matter who's out there. There shouldn't be that much of a difference. Maybe you play a little faster, maybe you play a little slower, maybe you rely on three-pointers more. But your style, your identity, your culture remains the same no matter who's in or out. That's what the Clippers did so well this year. And yeah, 23 and 27 without Paul George, it isn't a whole lot to write home about. That's a big absence. It's a huge absence for a team that's built around two stars and had to kind of cobble a team together. I think Ty Lue deserves a ton of credit. Ty Lue is such an underrated coach. He deserves a ton of credit for getting that team to play as hard as they did, for as long as they did, and to give that team a real chance to compete and play for something meaningful, to play for a playoff spot in the end. We'll talk a little bit about the Chicago Bulls, a team that had to do a lot of that shuffling too and lost a little bit of its identity and where they stand a year after the big trade with the Orlando Magic. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, summer is here. It's a little cool outside here in Orlando in mid-May, but we know the summer heat is coming. We know it's about to get real here, and we need the snack to get us through our day, whether we're outside, whether we're inside. No matter what, the summer days drag, and we need the boost of an energy bar to get us where we're going. Built Bars are the healthy and delicious snack that gives you that protein boost and that chocolate fix you are looking for. All Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means that with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. If that's not enough for you, they have mixed boxes with all the different kinds of flavors that they have, whether it's a Puffs flavor, which is these little protein-infused marshmallows, or the classic flavors that they offer all the time. Built Bar makes sure there is something for everyone. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs, and the choice is frankly pretty obvious. Go to Built.com to get all your favorites: banana cream pie, raspberry double chocolate. I think right now they have white chocolate cake, which sounds delicious, and I'm probably going to order some too. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. The Chicago Bulls are a really interesting case study, and they might honestly be one of the more interesting teams this offseason to figure out what they do. The Bulls, when they made the trade with the Orlando Magic a year ago on March, carved a new, really pushed their chips in the middle of the table to make the playoffs. They wanted to pair Zach LaVine with another all-star, Nikola Vucevic. They gave up 2 first-round picks to do that, one of them becoming Franz Wagner. And they really put some money in this offseason to help this team get over the hump into the playoffs. They acquired Lonzo Ball. They signed Alex Caruso. They signed DeMar DeRozan. The Bulls put themselves in a really good position to make the playoffs. And until injuries really decimated that roster with both Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball out, the Bulls were one of the best stories and best teams in the NBA. There's always something hiding beneath the surface, though. The Bulls struggled a lot against the best teams in the league. I think they had only 2 wins against teams in the top 4 of the Eastern Conference, and injuries ultimately shortchanged them. Both Zach LaVine also succumbing to injuries as well, as they fell to 6th in the Eastern Conference and ultimately bowed out in the playoffs against the Milwaukee Bucks. The Chicago Bulls are a case study in a team that pushed all their chips to the middle for what seems like a middling team and now has to reevaluate everything again. They spent a lot of capital to build this team, and to some extent, they are disappointed in what they got in Nikola Vucevic, even though they pushed him to be the 3rd guy on that team, because ultimately his defensive flaws were exposed again, and he couldn't quite ramp up his offense and fit into what they ultimately built. The Bulls are interesting for a number of reasons this offseason. A, they have Zach LaVine as a free agent, and there's already beginning to be some whispers that Zach LaVine may actually test free agency and could actually leave Chicago after it looked like he was set to stay in Chicago as a free agent. Beyond that, too, they are a team that feels poised to be a big player in the trade market. They're a team in sixth. They clearly, they have enough, it seems like, to compete, but it's not clear they have enough to win a championship. And if they want to win a championship, they're going to have to make a bold move. So especially if they're trying to convince Zach LaVine to stay, they've clearly been willing to make those bold moves before, and they'll have to make that bold move again. The Bulls could easily stand pat, of course. They were in good spot before injuries really killed the team. But that doesn't seem like the smart path for them. The Bulls are going to have to be active this offseason if they want to take the next step and get into the class of contenders in the Eastern Conference. This is, of course, a really important reminder for a rebuilding Orlando Magic team. The Bulls in January looked like the class of the Eastern Conference. It looked like a team that could compete for a championship or could be a quiet contender for a championship. Everything looked great. Now, at the end of the season, everything does not look good. This league is about constant evaluation and reevaluation. And if there's a lesson to take from the Bulls, it's that, yes, you can make progress in a season, but that can't be enough. You take steps forward, but you need to take that ultimate step forward. You can't be so content with a good season. It's obviously a flaw that the Magic had following the 2019 season. I think some of us would agree that, yes, that was a young team. There was a lot that the Magic should have reinvested in with Nikola Vucevic and Terrence Ross, but the Magic also did not do enough to push that team forward. They weren't aggressive to say, hey, we can be more than this. Now, whether that was the right decision or not is certainly one that can still be debated. But for sure, the 2020 Magic took a little bit of a step back because the Magic didn't try to take that step forward. Sometimes you got to take a little bit of a risk. What risk the Magic should take in that offseason is certainly a debate. Maybe it was trading Evan Fournier. Maybe it was trading Aaron Gordon at that point. They didn't really know what they had in Markelle Fultz yet. There was certainly a reason to say, okay, we can see what this young team grows into. But again, 2020 turned out to be a disaster. Jonathan Isaac getting hurt, everyone kind of stagnating. Markelle Fultz was good, but the Magic ultimately kind of hit their plateau, and it became too late to kind of take a step forward. They were waiting for the floor to drop out like it did in 2021. And again, I think that's a fair criticism of Jeff Weltman, that the Magic didn't do enough to evaluate and reevaluate the roster to say, hey, we've got to take a step forward. Jeff Weltman's called 2019 and 2020 a sugar high right now. And frankly, that's on him for not making it permanent or trying to figure out, like, okay, can we build with this team? And if not, maybe we should reset a little bit sooner. Again, I think there's a fair debate about what the Magic did and the path the Magic took. And certainly I think there's a fair argument to be said, like the Magic should have been aggressive in the summer of 2019, re-sign Vucevic, re-sign Ross, and then go out and get someone else to really help this team take their next step, trusting, maybe Jonathan Isaac to be a full-time four without Aaron Gordon there. That's really the lesson of the Bulls season, is you can't be satisfied. You have to take those next steps. You have to be willing to push your team forward. And if you fail to do that, you get stuck. The Bulls are in reevaluation mode this offseason, and really every offseason needs to be about evaluating and reevaluating what you have. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find us on Twitter at Locked On Magic. Subscribe to the podcast and Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun places to download podcasts to your podcast enable listening device. You can find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. And of course, for the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow us on Twitter at OMagicDaily. Don't forget, we'll be doing a Twitter Spaces on Friday at noon on at OMagicDaily. So get your last second draft lottery questions in. I may do my draft lottery explainer on that show as well. So we'll talk plenty about the draft. I've got some more draft coverage planned as we get ready for the Combine starting this weekend, and of course the NBA Draft Lottery on Tuesday. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Now that you're done listening to us, be sure to check out the Locked On NBA podcast, from the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals. Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. Check it out today at Locked On NBA. That's going to do it for me, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. For Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.